So whenever I do a Q&A on my Instagram, or people are asking me about gear, or I make a gear video and then people are commenting and all that kind of stuff, I inevitably get asked the question, some version of, if you could only choose one camera body and one lens to put on that body for the rest of your life, right? What would that be? And for me, that's a really interesting question, because as a travel photographer, I'm very, very conscious about bringing the smallest amount of kit with me so that I can have the most amount of gain with the least amount of size, the least amount of weight, etc., etc. And so I constantly try and optimize my setup, and I change my setups all the time with this in mind. But over the last several months, I've been testing out a specific setup that for the first time in a long time, I feel quite settled about, and I wanted to share that with you in this video in hopes that it'll give you a little bit of inspiration for your own setups as well. So let's dive in. All right, so let's talk about the body. So the body of choice here is Sony's Alpha 1. And I know what you're thinking. It's Sony's, flagship camera. It is the best that Sony has to offer, and it is a super duper expensive camera. And so of course it's going to be great, right? But I know it's expensive, but let me give you the reasons why I like it and I don't like it. And then I'll give you a recommendation afterwards on what you could potentially replace this camera with that's a lot more budget friendly. So after testing it out for several months, I actually wanted to wait for after a trip and do a full trip with this camera first, so that I could really, really get to know it before I gave my ideas and my thoughts about it. And so, I just came back from a trip to Hawaii with my girl, and I put it through its paces, and it really performed exceptionally well. And I'm really, really happy with this body. I like it for a bunch of different reasons. And, the list, I don't want to reel off an entire feature list or anything like that. But a couple of standout features that I wanted to call out are things like the speed. So, when it comes to autofocus, 30 frames a second, having physical dials, the depth of the buffer, the speed of the UI, everything is super fast to operate when it comes to this camera. And that makes this camera just a delight to use overall. I wanted to also call out the autofocus on this camera as well. The autofocus it's just insane. It's like no other camera that I've ever used ever before. I do a lot of street and a lot of portrait photography, and so, autofocus is really, really important to me to make sure that I'm capturing every single moment, and that every, series of images or burst of images is going to be in focus, and so that I can then, grab that decisive moment when I need to. And the autofocus on this camera is just absolutely insane. It never misses, and that really makes this camera a very confidence-inspiring camera. And yeah, I definitely love it for that reason. But what I find really interesting about this camera is how much of a hybrid it is. It almost seems like it is a blend of the A7R Mark IV and the A7S III from both a stills and a video perspective rolled into one. I own both of those cameras, and when it comes to stills performance and image quality, this is, in my opinion, on par with the A7R Mark IV. If not a little bit better, because in my opinion, it has a little bit of a nicer and a gentler noise profile when you're working with those images. And so I love it for that. Plus, it's 50 megapixels, which is way more than most people need. Now, from a video perspective, especially when you're comparing it to the A7S III, this thing still has 4K 120. It has S-Cinetone, it has S-Log, it has APS-C mode, it has all of the video features that you could ever want as well. And so that's why it's really interesting to own this camera, because it is the best of both worlds, in my opinion. Now, of course, no camera is perfect, and the A1 is no exception to that. There are a couple of things that I wish could be improved with the A1. The first of which is this damn tilt screen. These tilt screens have been on the Alpha cameras for forever, and they're just not that great. They don't move that far, the angles aren't that fantastic, and compared to a flip screen, when you have a camera that is both for stills and for video, it's much nicer to have the flip screen from a versatility perspective. I wish this camera had that, or even better, Sony developed a flip screen that could also tilt at the same time. I think that would be absolutely fantastic. Now, there are also a couple of new features that were made on the A7 Mark IV that haven't yet, fingers crossed, I hope, made it to the A1. Stuff like the setting switcher between stills and video, lens breathing compensation, the live streaming features and functionalities, and a whole bunch of other little things that were recently developed. So, this is not perfect. Those kind of little features I wish made it into this camera, but we can't have it all. Now, this camera is also very, very expensive, as I mentioned before. And so if you don't have the money for this A1 and you want something that's good in terms of a recommendation as well, I would recommend the new Sony A7 Mark IV. I recently did a review on this camera, and spoiler alert, it's fantastic. That camera is really, really good in terms of value for money, especially when you are a hybrid shooter, when you shoot both stills and video. It has amazing IQ, it has decent video features, it has a flip screen. It is a baby version of this camera for about less than half price of this camera, and about 60 to 70% of the features and the quality of this camera, in my opinion. But overall, if you can't afford this camera, the A7 Mark IV, the new one, is fantastic as well. All right, let's talk lenses and what goes on that body. If I could only have one lens for the rest of my life, what would it be? And if you have been a long-time subscriber of the YouTube channel here, or a long-time follower over on my Instagram, you'll know exactly which lens this is. And of course, it is the 1635 G Master lens from Sony as well. This lens is insanely versatile, it is insanely sharp, it is not too heavy, not too big. 35mm is my favorite focal length. And for me, if you know my work, you'll know that I've shot a majority of my portfolio with this lens because I use it for everything. I use it for portraits, landscapes, street, architecture, all the things that I engage in as a travel photographer. I use this lens. This lens is so good. This is my third copy of this lens because I just have it on multiple bodies, and one of them broke as well. But this lens is irreplaceable for me when it comes to my workflow, and it's always found on my body. I almost never take it off. It is that highly used, and I love it that much. So this is my lens of choice. However, there is a lens that deserves a little bit of an honorable mention that I've been using quite a lot recently, and that is the 35mm f1.4 G Master lens from Sony as well. This is a fantastic prime lens. If you're into primes, this is my highest recommendation when it comes to lenses. This is insanely sharp. 35mm is insanely versatile when it comes to landscapes and street and portrait. And the f1.4 you get, the bokeh you get from this lens is just absolutely deliciously creamy. It is some of the best bokeh that I own pretty much, and it is so nice to look at, and I highly recommend this lens as well. Either way though, whether you go for the prime or you go for the zoom, you can't go wrong. Both of these lenses are absolutely fantastic, so I highly recommend either of them. All right, and that's it. This is my one body and one lens combination, the Alpha 1 and the 1635 G Master lens. And together, it's compact, it's lightweight, it doesn't take a lot of space in my bag, it's not too obtrusive, it's perfect for travel photography, and it literally does everything that I want it to do. It handles everything that I can throw at it, whether that is taking images for my portfolio, or making images that are going to be turned into prints, or even detailed enough to go on Instagram, or whether that is, taking videos for talking head or B-roll, or making videos for YouTube or anything like that. It handles absolutely every single thing that I could possibly throw at it. And so I will definitely be using this combination for, at least a little while to come. All right, let me know what your one body and one lens combinations are. I would love to know, because the journey doesn't end, right? Like, I'm always looking for more inspiration on what combinations work well for other people, so that I could then be inspired by them and try it out for myself as well. All right, that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one, but until then, get out there and make something that matters. All right, peace.